It takes a huge operation to get sufficient, safe, nutritious food to all of us. Although the food supply system touches our lives every day, we see only a minute part of it. As a way of seeing a fuller picture, it's useful to think of the function of the many millions of organisations and people operating in the food supply landscape. I'm going to show you a map of these functions. It will help you, I hope, to see this landscape differently, so see aspects of our food supply system you've probably never thought about before. At the consumption end of the food landscape, there are the supermarkets, shops, places where we eat out, all familiar to us. Regrettably, we can now add food banks here. People rarely think, though, that sewage and water treatment plants are part of the food system, but they are, not least because that's where the food we don't digest, but flush down the loo, has to be dealt with. At the other end of the supply system is primary production. Even city folk have some idea, although perhaps naive ideas, of what goes on here from the programmes we watch and the stories we hear about farming. And what's in this big space between primary production and consumption? Nearly all fresh produce is highly perishable. It would go rotten before it got to us without secondary production, i.e. that widely disregarded space between farm gate and buyer. It's where most of the activity and value in food production lies. Everything you've seen and heard so far is above this red line. Notice on this map the even larger space below the red line. It's what happens here that lets us, consumers, buy and eat what the producers produce. A way of starting to look at the big, complicated, below the red line landscape is to start at the right-hand end of it, with water. It's not just water we need, of course. Not just primary production, not just secondary production. It's a lot more besides. It's all of this and this. Underpinning the whole food supply landscape is what governments do. Governments set the parameters of engagement between what all the entities in the food supply system do. They set up and fund regulatory bodies. They make regulations and enforce them. They set fiscal policies. They negotiate trade agreements, perhaps with tariff and/or non-tariff barriers. If anything happens below the red line, there will be repercussions somewhere above the red line. Perhaps just a tiny ripple few will notice. Perhaps, though, something suddenly devastating happens, or there's a slow burn degradation we don't notice until we see food shortages and scarcities, in extreme cases even famine. Food shortages, scarcities, hunger, famine are like food production itself, processes, not events.